Hello, esteemed gentlemen. Some men don't walk into your life, they rearrange the furniture of your soul and leave you wondering why the room feels colder when they're gone. Psychologists have long noted that people who thrive in solitude often possess the most unshakable sense of identity. Sigma males are the living embodiment of that fact. They don't just march to the beat of their own drum, they own the entire rhythm, and if you can't keep pace, you'll be left stumbling in silence. What makes them so different isn't arrogance, nor is it rebellion. It's that rare and unsettling combination of freedom, detachment, and unpredictability. You never quite know if they're the storm, the calm before it, or the silence after it's passed. And the truth is, most women who think they can handle a Sigma male end up shattered because they underestimated what they were really stepping into. It's like trying to cage lightning. It's beautiful when it lights up your world, but the moment you try to hold it, you'll get burned. And if you're not careful, the only thing left in your hands is smoke and regret. Plus, maybe the faint sound of him laughing in the distance at how hard you tried. Number 1, you realize too late. He was the prize. You only realize the weight of a Sigma male once he's gone. At first, it doesn't feel that way. He isn't the kind of man who floods your world with loud promises, endless attention, or exaggerated declarations. In fact, his presence can feel so steady, so effortless, that you almost mistake it for something ordinary. He doesn't compete for your attention, doesn't make a spectacle of himself, and never plays the typical games men use to keep a woman hooked. And because of that, many women underestimate him. They confuse his quiet confidence for passivity, his lack of chasing for lack of interest, and his independence for detachment. But then, the moment arrives when he's no longer around, and that's when the realization cuts the deepest. Everything you thought was just normal about him suddenly feels rare. The way he never demanded validation, but made you feel truly seen. The way he could listen without judgment, but still call out your flaws without flinching. The way he carried his life like it belonged fully to him, yet still let you be part of it without ever making you feel owned. Those things don't echo back when he's gone. They leave silence. And that silence hurts more than any argument ever could. Most women spend years after trying to replace that kind of man. They go through others who might be charming, attractive, successful, or even generous, but something always feels missing. The replacements talk too much, need too much, prove too much. None of them carry that invisible authority that a Sigma male radiates without effort. And that's when it dawns. The man they thought they could handle was not just different. He was the rarest kind of man, the one who never needed them, but chose them anyway. And the cruel truth? By the time they recognize what he was, he's already moved on, leaving nothing but the memory of how it felt to be with someone unshakable. That realization is what shatters most women, not the loss itself, but the knowledge that they had something priceless in their hands, and only saw its value after it slipped away. Number 2, you won't be the center of his universe. With most men, relationships often shift their center of gravity. Their moods bend around their partner's moods, their choices bend around their partner's expectations, and their identity becomes tied to the relationship itself. But with a Sigma male, the axis is internal. His world doesn't suddenly tilt because someone else has stepped into it. His solitude, his independence, and his inner rhythm remain the core of who he is, no matter how deep the connection runs. This is where many women find themselves frustrated, even shattered. They enter expecting to become the center of his universe, the gravitational pull around which his world orbits. But with him, that position doesn't exist. His solitude always wins because it isn't something he runs from. It's something he's built his entire being upon. And when you find yourself competing against it, you'll discover that solitude doesn't bend, doesn't falter, and doesn't lose. The paradox is sharp. On one hand, his independence is what draws women in. They admire the man who isn't desperate, who doesn't crumble under pressure, who isn't needy or clingy. But once inside, that same independence feels like distance. His ability to detach from the relationship without collapsing creates a sense of imbalance. You're investing your whole emotional weight, while he holds something back for himself. Not because he doesn't care, but because he refuses to surrender his identity to anyone. And this is where the pain cuts deeper. It's not rejection, it's not neglect. It's simply the truth that you'll never own him fully. You'll never replace his need for solitude, and you'll never eclipse the satisfaction he draws from it. That realization leaves many women restless, even resentful. They can't stand the fact that his world doesn't orbit around them, that they can't dictate his every move, that his happiness doesn't depend on their presence. But that's exactly what makes him so rare. He doesn't love you because he needs you to fill a void. He loves you because he chooses to, while still being whole without you. And while that choice is more powerful than dependency, it also feels like the most difficult truth to accept. No matter how much of him you have, his solitude will always have more. Number 3. He's not afraid of losing you. A Sigma male isn't driven by the fear of abandonment the way most men are. He doesn't carry the silent desperation of, "Please don't leave me," that so many women are used to exploiting. His greatest fear isn't losing you, it's losing himself. That means he's not clinging to the relationship as a lifeline. Instead, he's measuring whether it threatens his freedom, his peace, or his sense of self. And that single difference creates an imbalance of power that most women don't know how to handle. With most men, the thought of being left is paralyzing. They'll compromise, bend, or even betray themselves just to keep a woman from walking away. But the Sigma male has no such weakness. He doesn't live in fear of emptiness because solitude is his natural state. He was whole before you, and he'll be whole after you. That certainty makes him untouchable. You can't trap someone whose worst-case scenario is the life he already thrives in. For women, this changes everything. The usual dynamics collapse. Threats of leaving don't shake him. Withdrawal of affection doesn't scare him. Ultimatums don't trap him. Instead of gripping tighter, he loosens his hold and steps back, as if reminding you that he's never chained to the outcome. And that absence of fear is what breaks many women before the relationship even starts. Because here's the harsh truth. Most women secretly rely on a man's fear of abandonment to maintain control. When that fear is gone, so is their leverage. The Sigma male reverses the equation. He's not the one afraid of loss, you are. You begin to sense that he can live without you, while you're not sure you can live without the rare gravity he carries. That shift creates a quiet panic, because suddenly you're the one at risk of losing something irreplaceable. This is why being with a Sigma male feels both magnetic and terrifying. He doesn't need you to complete him. He chooses you without needing you, and that choice carries more weight than any dependence ever could. But it also leaves you constantly aware that if the relationship ever demands his freedom, he'll walk away without hesitation, untouched, unbroken, and already at peace. Number 4. He values peace over passion. For a Sigma male, peace isn't just a preference. It's a priority. He doesn't mistake chaos for excitement or toxicity for love. While many men will tolerate drama to keep a woman close, he won't. The moment he senses emotional games, unnecessary conflict, or cycles of manipulation, he quietly removes himself. There's no screaming, no begging, no dramatic exit, just silence, distance, and absence. And that absence becomes the loudest message of all. This is why many women find him impossible to handle. If you're used to controlling men through volatility, arguments, or emotional highs and lows, you'll find that he refuses to play. He won't chase after you when you storm off. He won't engage in battles to prove his love. He won't feed the fire you start, just to feel secure in his attention. He values his peace more than he values temporary passion, and once that line is crossed, he won't waste energy trying to salvage the chaos. At first, his calm can feel almost frustrating. You may mistake it for indifference, when in reality it's discipline. He knows the cost of letting toxic cycles consume him, and he'd rather walk away than stay entangled. And this restraint, his ability to prioritize peace over the rush of drama, is exactly what unsettles women who thrive on emotional turbulence. They're used to men who will match their chaos, men who will fight back, men who will break down and beg. With him, none of that happens. What makes it even harder is the way his silence lingers. When he disappears, he doesn't leave behind noise or unfinished battles. He leaves a void. And that void eats at you because it forces you to confront your own chaos without distraction. It makes you realize that the power you thought you had, the ability to control a man through turmoil, means nothing to someone who refuses to join the fight. That's the quiet cruelty of the Sigma male. He doesn't punish you with anger, he punishes you with indifference. And for many women, that indifference cuts deeper than any argument ever could. Because once you've experienced the peace he protects so fiercely, living in your own chaos without him feels unbearable. Number 5. He doesn't chase, but he's not passive. When a Sigma male gives his attention, it's not scattered or half-hearted. It's exact, deliberate, and almost overwhelming. He doesn't spread himself thin, chasing after every opportunity or every person, and that restraint is what makes his focus so powerful. Most men throw out attention like spare change, hoping someone will pick it up. He treats it like currency, only spending it where it truly matters. And when you're on the receiving end of that focus, it doesn't feel casual. It feels like he's dissecting the noise around you and zeroing in only on you. That's where the addictive part comes in. A Sigma male doesn't flood your phone with constant messages or smother you with exaggerated gestures. But when he does choose to engage, the energy hits with a force you weren't expecting. It's not the shallow thrill of being chased, it's the deeper intoxication of being seen, understood, and chosen by someone who rarely lets anyone into his orbit. That intensity is why so many women confuse his silence with disinterest, then later discover it was never about passivity. It was about patience. The danger is that once you've experienced that kind of deliberate presence, it's almost impossible to settle for anything else. Other men's attention starts to feel noisy, desperate, or empty in comparison. And when the Sigma male withdraws, because he will if he senses his peace is threatened, the absence feels brutal. It's not just losing a man, it's losing the sharp, unforgettable precision of being on the receiving end of something rare. That's why women often find themselves shattered. They didn't lose someone who begged for their time or chased them endlessly. They lost someone who never needed to chase, because when he finally chose to give his attention, it was worth more than everyone else's combined. Number 6. You never fully own him. A Sigma male never gives himself away entirely, no matter how close you get to him. He can love you, care for you, and share pieces of his world with you, but there will always be a corner of his soul that remains locked away. It isn't bitterness, trauma, or secrecy. It's simply his nature. He belongs to himself first, and that independence is not negotiable. For most women, this is both intoxicating and maddening. At first, it feels mysterious. That untouchable piece of him makes you want to dig deeper, to be the one who finally unlocks what no one else could. You may convince yourself that with enough love, effort, or patience, you'll eventually break through. But what you don't realize is that there is no breaking through. That inner part of him is not a wall waiting to be torn down. It's the very foundation of who he is, and it's precisely because it can't be reached that it feels so irresistible. The trouble comes later. When the novelty wears off, when the craving to be everything to him grows stronger, that unreachable side starts to feel like rejection. You'll feel the frustration of knowing he's with you, but never fully in your possession. That realization gnaws at many women because it collides with a deep, often unspoken desire to be the center of a man's entire existence. With him, you'll never get that. He doesn't orbit around anyone. He doesn't surrender his identity for a relationship, and he doesn't dissolve into someone else's expectations. This doesn't make him cold. It makes him unbreakable. But to the woman who loves him, it feels like a constant tug-of-war between fascination and frustration. She adores him for the very independence that eventually leaves her restless. She's drawn to his self-possession but secretly resents it because it means she can't fully own him. And when she finally realizes that no one ever will, the truth shatters her. She didn't lose a piece of him. She never had that piece in the first place. That's the paradox of being with a Sigma male. The part of him you can never reach is exactly what makes him unforgettable, but it's also the part that will drive you mad. Number 7. He doesn't flex, yet he intimidates. A Sigma male doesn't announce his worth, he embodies it. While most men exhaust themselves trying to prove they're strong, rich, or influential, he doesn't bother. He doesn't flash luxury, doesn't boast about his achievements, and doesn't feel the need to be the loudest voice in the room. And that absence of performance is exactly what makes him intimidating. There's nothing to measure, nothing to compare, and nothing to compete against, because he's not even playing the same game. This quiet confidence unsettles people, especially women who are used to men putting on a show. When a man doesn't flex, you're left with the raw, undeniable presence of who he really is. And that presence can feel heavier than any display of power. It's not in his words or his actions. It's in the way he carries himself without needing an audience. That silent authority commands more respect than the loudest performance ever could. What most don't realize is that flexing comes from insecurity. It's proof that someone needs external validation. The Sigma male doesn't seek that validation, which makes his energy harder to penetrate. You can't bait him into proving himself. You can't trap him into competing, and you can't inflate your own importance by being the center of his attention. That makes him unpredictable, and unpredictability is intimidating in itself. For women, the effect is even sharper. A man who doesn't try to impress still leaves an impression. His refusal to showcase or sell himself creates a magnetic pull. You want to know more, you want to get closer, and you want to figure out why he feels so untouchable. And the irony is, the harder you try to decode him, the more you realize his power lies in exactly what he withholds. Meanwhile, the men around him look weaker without him lifting a finger. Their need to show off suddenly looks childish, desperate, almost embarrassing in comparison. And that's the cruel twist. The Sigma male doesn't win by outshining anyone. He wins by not even entering the contest. That kind of quiet dominance can't be faked, and it leaves people unsettled, intrigued, and sometimes even threatened without him saying a word. Number 8. You can't predict his next move. A Sigma male is impossible to map out because he doesn't live by formulas. Most men have patterns. You push a certain button, you get a predictable reaction. You withhold attention, they chase harder. You test their ego, they defend themselves. You play jealous games, they fall into the trap. But with a Sigma male, none of those moves work the way you expect. He doesn't give you the predictable cycle you're used to, and that unpredictability keeps you constantly destabilized. It's not that he's trying to be mysterious, he simply doesn't operate from the same rule book as everyone else. His reactions come from his principles, not from his impulses, and because his principles are internal rather than socially programmed, you can't anticipate them. He doesn't seek approval, he doesn't crave dominance, and he doesn't fear rejection. That freedom makes him difficult to control because there's no string to pull that guarantees a result. This unpredictability can feel exhilarating at first. Women are drawn to it because it makes every interaction feel charged, like they're dealing with someone who exists outside the script of modern dating. But the longer it goes on, the more unsettling it becomes. You never really know where you stand because he doesn't play the role of the predictable boyfriend, the eager pursuer, or the jealous partner. He switches lanes without warning, not because he's fickle, but because he refuses to be boxed in. And that refusal drives many women crazy. They crave the comfort of knowing that if they act a certain way, they'll get a familiar response. But the Sigma male's detachment makes that impossible. Sometimes he'll engage deeply, other times he'll vanish without explanation. Sometimes he'll show sharp interest, other times he'll seem unreachable. The one constant is that you can never manipulate him into doing what you expect. That's where the real destabilization lies. He forces you to face the reality that you are not in control, not of him, not of the connection, and not of the outcome. And for many women, that lack of predictability is unbearable. They fall into a cycle of chasing certainty from a man who thrives on never being fully pinned down. And by the time they realize that his unpredictability isn't chaos but freedom, it's already too late. He's moved on. Number 9. Your social value doesn't impress him. With a Sigma male, all the glitter you've built around yourself, your followers, admirers, titles, or the image you've polished for the world, has no weight. To him, it's noise. He doesn't measure worth by numbers on a screen, the crowd you can summon, or how loudly others praise your name. That kind of social currency may impress most men, but for him, it's monopoly money. It looks flashy, but it buys nothing real. And that indifference hits harder than outright criticism. When someone doesn't attack your value but simply shrugs at it, it forces you to confront whether your worth is actually internal or just borrowed from the opinions of others. With him, you can't hide behind the shield of popularity or the illusion of being in demand. He'll see right past it, and his lack of awe will strip you bare in a way that feels unsettling. Most women are used to their social value tilting the power dynamic in their favor. When other men are dazzled by their clout, it becomes leverage, something to manipulate with. But the Sigma male can't be manipulated that way, and that denial of power creates frustration. It feels like he's rewriting the rules of the game, because the tricks that usually work suddenly don't. What he values isn't what you show the world, but what you are when no one's watching. He notices how you treat people who can't benefit you. He watches whether your confidence collapses when you're no longer being celebrated. He pays attention to the substance behind the image, and if there's nothing there, he won't pretend otherwise. That quiet discernment is brutal because it leaves you exposed, forced to face the possibility that without your social armor, you don't know who you are. For many women, this is why being with a Sigma male becomes unbearable. He doesn't validate the masks they've worked so hard to maintain. He doesn't play into the illusion they've sold to the world. Instead, he stands there, unmoved, leaving them to wrestle with themselves. And in the end, that indifference can feel harsher than rejection, because it's not that he doesn't see you, it's that he sees through you. Number 10. He redefines intimacy. With a Sigma male, intimacy doesn't look like what most people are used to. He doesn't believe in constant access, endless updates, or performative affection. He doesn't drown you in texts, cling to your side, or smother you with rehearsed gestures. Instead, he gives intimacy in doses that are rare but real, and that scarcity is what makes it feel both electrifying and unbearable. When he lets you in, it's not shallow, it's not small talk or scripted romance, it's raw. He shows you glimpses of his world that almost no one else gets to see, and those moments feel more alive than hours of empty closeness with anyone else. He'll open up without warning, share a truth so unfiltered it leaves you stunned, or look at you in a way that feels like he's seeing straight into your core. That intensity is unforgettable, because it isn't frequent, it's precious. But the very thing that makes it powerful also makes it difficult. Because he doesn't hand it out every day, you begin to crave it, almost like a drug. When he withdraws back into his natural solitude, you feel the absence harder than you expected. You start waiting for the next rare spark, replaying the last moment in your head, trying to figure out what it meant. That gap between experiences can leave you restless, even anxious, because intimacy with him isn't predictable or scheduled. It's earned, and it arrives only when it's genuine. This rhythm is alien to most women. They're used to equating love with constant reassurance, constant communication, and constant presence. With him, those surface-level markers are missing, and it forces you to rethink what closeness actually means. It's not about possession, but about connection. Not about quantity, but about quality. And that realization can be liberating or crushing depending on whether you can handle it. For many women, this redefinition is too much. The high of those rare, raw moments becomes addictive, but the spaces in between feel unbearable. And eventually, the imbalance shatters them, not because he withheld intimacy, but because he showed them a version of it that made everything else feel hollow. Once you've tasted that kind of realness, you can't go back to ordinary closeness without feeling cheated. Number 11. He's not in competition with other men. A Sigma male doesn't compete with other men because in his world there's no competition to begin with. He doesn't measure himself against who's stronger, richer, louder, or more popular. He doesn't feel the urge to prove that he's better than anyone else because his sense of worth is internal, not borrowed from comparisons. And that quiet refusal to compete creates an effect that's more powerful than any bragging rights could ever achieve. For women, this is where the paradox begins. Your other admirers put in effort. They chase, they flex, they compete for attention, hoping to outshine the rest. At first, that noise feels flattering. But then, you look at the Sigma, the man who isn't trying, isn't performing, and isn't desperate, and suddenly everyone else seems smaller. Their effort looks exaggerated, even childish in the shadow of his silence. It's unsettling because you can't interpret him the way you interpret the others. The men competing for you are transparent. You can read their intentions easily. But the Sigma male, his lack of effort feels mysterious. You don't know whether he's uninterested, deeply selective, or quietly watching from a distance. And that ambiguity works in his favor because mystery has more gravity than noise. Without lifting a finger, he becomes the silent winner. While the others fight to climb a ladder, he's standing at the top of a different mountain altogether, looking uninterested in the game itself. That detachment makes him seem untouchable. And in a strange twist, even more desirable. His refusal to compete doesn't reduce his value. It multiplies it. The irony is brutal. The men trying the hardest to win your attention actually make him look stronger. Their desperation exposes their dependency, while his calm restraint exposes his independence. And independence is always more attractive, because it suggests he doesn't need you, but chooses you if he decides you're worth it. That's why most women end up shattered. They realize too late that the man they thought was disinterested was the only one with real control all along. The competition was never between men. It was between your expectations and his refusal to play by them. And in that refusal, he always wins. Number 12, he forces you to grow or break. A Sigma male doesn't let you coast through a relationship in comfort. Just by being himself, he forces you to confront parts of yourself you might have spent years avoiding. His independence highlights your dependency. His calm exposes your chaos. His self-assurance makes your insecurities louder in your own head. He doesn't even have to point them out. His very presence is enough to hold up a mirror you can't ignore. For some women, this becomes the hardest challenge of their lives. They realize that being with him means growth isn't optional, it's demanded. If you're insecure, you'll feel the sting of it every time he doesn't feed your need for constant reassurance. If you rely on external validation, his indifference to your social clout will strip away that shield. If you're used to controlling men with emotional games, his refusal to engage will expose just how empty those tactics really are. But here's the brutal part. There's no middle ground with him. Either you evolve, or you collapse. If you face your insecurities head-on, he becomes a catalyst for your transformation. His stability can ground you, his detachment can inspire you to build your own, and his independence can push you to find strength you didn't know you had. Many women who rise to that challenge discover a new version of themselves, sharper, stronger, and more self-assured. Yet for others, the pressure is unbearable. Instead of growth, they spiral. The constant mirror he holds up makes them feel smaller, weaker, and more exposed. Instead of rising to meet him, they shrink in the face of his quiet demands. They start blaming him for the discomfort when in reality, he's only showing them what was already there. This is why being with a Sigma male isn't easy. He's not the type to coddle your weaknesses or indulge your illusions. He won't play the savior, but he also won't play the fool. And that's why so many women end up shattered. Not because he broke them, but because he refused to carry the weight of insecurities they wouldn't confront themselves. With him, you either grow into someone stronger, or you break under the pressure. There's no safe middle. A Sigma male is not the kind of man you simply handle. He dismantles every script, breaks every predictable pattern, and shatters every illusion of control. The games that work on others collapse against him. The power moves that bend, most men leave no mark on him. He cannot be cornered, manipulated, or owned because his center of gravity is always within himself. That is what makes him magnetic, and that is also what makes him impossible for many to endure. To be with him is to face yourself without filters. His presence exposes your insecurities, his silence strips away your masks, and his indifference reminds you that your leverage doesn't exist. He doesn't fear losing you, he fears losing himself. He doesn't need your validation, he thrives without it. He doesn't orbit around you, he orbits around his solitude, and that is the paradox. The very independence that draws women in is the same force that eventually leaves them broken. Most men play for approval, recognition, or dominance. The Sigma plays for nothing, and in that refusal he wins everything. He doesn't flex, yet he intimidates. He doesn't chase, yet he lingers in your mind. He doesn't fight for control, yet his absence feels like the heaviest blow. With him, intimacy isn't constant. It's rare and unforgettable. With him, love isn't ownership, it's choice. And with him, survival isn't about keeping him, it's about keeping up with the mirror he forces you to face. That's why most women walk away shattered. Not because he set out to break them, but because he refused to play by rules that were never his to begin with. He is the man you cannot script, cannot cage, and cannot fully hold. To stand beside him, you must grow, or you will collapse. So the question isn't whether you want a Sigma male. The question is whether you can endure the reality of one. Because once you've crossed paths with him, there's no forgetting it, and there's no going back. A Sigma male cannot be tamed, scripted, or owned. He is the storm you can't predict and the silence you can't ignore. Women aren't shattered by him because he tries to break them. They're shattered because he exposes truths they can't run from. To handle a Sigma is to step into a mirror, and most don't survive the reflection. If this breakdown struck a nerve, or opened your eyes to the reality of the Sigma male, don't just watch and move on. Be part of this journey. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters here. This is more than a video. It's a movement of truth most people are too afraid to touch. Stay tuned, because we're only getting started.